Hi, my name is Abby. I'm a new mom of an almost 2-week-old boy, and I wanted to make this video because I transitioned from breastfeeding to formula feeding very, very quickly within the first 10 days of him being born. And when I was going through that transition, I was looking for videos on YouTube of other moms going through the same thing, and I couldn't find any. So I thought it might be helpful to create a video myself explaining the transition and what I went through and why I chose to do it, and in case it helps any other new moms out there. I'm not a public figure at all. I don't have a YouTube page or a Facebook public profile. I'm not looking for likes or follows or comments or anything like that. In fact, when I post this video, I'm going to disable the comments. So if you really want to get in touch with me to ask any questions or anything like that, you can probably comment on, I think I have a couple other public videos on my YouTube channel that you could comment on, and I could try to get in touch with you that way. Anyway, so like I said, I had my son almost 2 weeks ago. And I originally thought that I would breastfeed exclusively for a while, at least at first. I naively thought it would be super easy. I really had no idea how challenging it would be, both physically and mentally. And I really wasn't prepared for how challenging it was. I had him via C-section, if that means any difference between, how he was born. And about an hour after I had him, they gave him to me to attempt to do some breastfeeding. That very first attempt was without a nipple shield or anything like that, just put him, right to my breast. And it didn't go so well, but I wasn't discouraged because it was the very first time, and we were all a little exhausted and, new to the experience and everything. And so we tried for, I don't know, maybe about 10 or 15 minutes on, I think, just one side, and it just didn't work, but that was okay. So they took him back to the nursery and brought me to the recovery room. And then a few hours later, I think they brought him back in again to try again. And this time they gave me a nipple shield to try to help, make it a little bit more obvious or a little bit more easier for him to latch on. He was just having a lot of trouble latching. And the nipple shield helped a little, but it still just wasn't, he wasn't fully latching. And again, like being new, like I really didn't know what I was doing. So without getting into all the super details of what happened, because it's not particularly relevant, but I had a C-section, so we were in the hospital, my husband and I, we were in the hospital for 4 days, and each day, starting on that first, I had him early in the morning, very early in the morning, around 2:14, so later that day, after we got a little bit of sleep, lactation specialist came in and helped us kind of go through how to get him to latch, and understanding that how the nipple shield really worked, and getting the full areola into, or as much as the areola into the nipple shield as possible, and then having him latch onto the areola as much as possible, and different holds, and expressing the milk and all that. And obviously my milk, it was the first day, my milk hadn't even started to come in yet, hardly. I think I had a little bit of the colostrum, enough to kind of get him going. And then starting on the second full day, I think we had a different lactation consultant who we had for the rest of the stay in the hospital. And she was very knowledgeable, but she was almost a little bit overly enthusiastic and knowledgeable in her approach. And she was very much like kind of hands-on and a little, I don't know, I found the whole experience with her a little bit overwhelming. And that's when I had my first breakdown in the hospital, which of course, wasn't completely just for the breastfeeding, but it was also due to exhaustion and hormones and, just all the factors of being a new mom. And so she gave us a lot of encouragement, and from what she saw in her visits, she thought it was going okay, but I knew it was not going well. He just wasn't latching, and the thing about a newborn that doesn't latch, or what we found, I'm so not an expert on anything, what we found was that it took 2 hands to put the nipple shield on, and then if he wasn't swaddled, because I was trying to breastfeed him skin to skin just to get that, initial bonding experience, his hands would always swat it away, and then I would get frustrated and have to reattach the shield, and my milk wasn't really coming in, so the shield wasn't really sticking, because you use a little bit of water to hold it on, but that doesn't really hold it, and the milk is a little stickier, and so that holds it, but that took a few days to really come in. Anyway, so it was a very frustrating experience. My husband had to help me, and so it was a 2-man job, like a full hands-on 2-person job, like trying to hold him and get him in just the right position. He still wasn't really latching, so I wasn't really sure how much he was drinking and how much nutrition he was getting. And after, I think on the 3rd day of, being in the hospital, they weighed him, and he was down about almost 12% in body weight, which was a little too low. They say newborns can go about, lose about 5 to 10% of their body weight, but he lost 12 and was looking a little jaundiced. So they asked if it would be okay to introduce some formula into his diet. And of course we said, okay, anything to keep him healthy and bring his weight back up to where it needed to be. So my gut feeling is that once they introduced the formula to him, they have those little like ready-made, we use the Enfamil 2-ounce bottles, and they put the nipple on it. And so that nipple, the bottle nipple, was a lot more pronounced and easier for him to find. And so I think he may have gotten a little bit of nipple confusion, and he found the nipple on the bottle a whole lot easier to suck on than mine. And he has a very strong suck. Like, that's not a problem. It was more a problem of latching and like finding the right fit for the nipple. And so because he just was 2 below weight, we found they wanted us to supplement with each breastfeeding. So what was happening was that I would attempt to breastfeed him, every 2 to 3 hours, as they instructed us to do in the hospital. And then we were also supplementing. So I would do the breastfeeding, and then my husband would supplement a little bit with the formula. And fortunately, the formula helped to like plump him up a little bit. So by the time we left the hospital, he was almost back to his birth weight, and so they were pretty comfortable with that. But all in all, like, it was just, the breastfeeding was just not going very well in those first few days. And I know it was early. I know like we still could have tried, continue to really try and seek out more experience and expertise and all that. I was also pumping at the same time. They encouraged me to pump to really get my milk supply in. And pumping was just such I did not enjoy that at all. It was so much work, and it would just take so long, and it hurt my breasts, and it just was not a fun thing to do. So when we got home from the hospital, we tried to continue the routine that we were taught in the hospital, breastfeeding every couple of hours, pumping regularly, and then supplementing with formula. But we kind of loosened the reins a little bit when we got home. So we got home on, I think it was like late in the day on day 4 of his being alive. And then we just sort of lessened it. I was starting to, I was having regular breakdowns over the breastfeeding, and it was just getting very taxing, more emotionally than physically. Physically I was okay with it. I mean, it's not a comfortable thing, but I was willing to keep going with that. But mentally, it just was making me feel like a bad mom and I can't really put it into words very well. I just knew in my gut that it wasn't the best option for my son or for me or for us as a family. It was really dragging me down and making me feel very negative. It was almost making me resent my child a little bit, because he just wasn't latching well. And so the whole experience was kind of negative, and that just wasn't healthy for us. So I kind of knew in my gut that we needed to switch over to formula fully, but I was struggling with that mentally, thinking like, okay, it's only been a few days. I've really haven't tried to breastfeed very much. I should seek out more lactation help, a support group, that sort of thing. But the thought of even having to seek out another lactation specialist or a support group, that was another sort of mental roadblock that kind of had me feeling very negative. So all of these different aspects of breastfeeding combined really just made me realize in my gut that moving over to formula completely was the right way to go. Like I said, he was feeding very well from the bottle. He was gaining weight from the bottle. So, a well-fed baby is and was the ultimate goal. So that being said, I just kind of lessened it. The next day I did one less breastfeeding trial and one less pumping and et cetera, et cetera. And so by day 10, he was completely formula fed. I had 100% stopped breastfeeding, stopped pumping, because it had only been a couple of days. My milk had only started to come in. So after about a day or so, my milk wasn't really, my breasts weren't super swollen or tender or anything, so I didn't really have to worry about that. I was super concerned that my milk would still be coming in a lot, and it would I was worried about clogged milk ducts and things like that, but none of that was a factor because it was such a short turnaround. So I think that's about everything in regards to the timeline. We just had his almost 2-week checkup, and he's now slightly surpassed his birth weight. So he's doing great. The doctor says that we're doing fine with it, and feeding him as regularly as we should. Oh, the other thing that we didn't know, and hopefully this is a helpful thing for new moms, is that so in the hospital, they had us feed him on a schedule every 2 to 3 hours or so. And so they wanted us to wake him up to make sure that we fed him. And this was only because, and again, nobody told us this in the hospital, this was only because he was losing weight and he wasn't gaining it back fast enough. So we needed to really almost like kind of force feed him a little bit. And so when we got home from the hospital, for the first day or two, we tried to continue that schedule because that's what we thought we had to do. And so then we went to the first checkup, a couple of days later, and the doctor said not to do that, to let him eat on his schedule and never to wake a sleeping baby. So once we took the doctor's orders and stopped trying to force him onto our feeding schedule and went with his feeding schedule, and moved over to formula altogether, it was just kind of a magic fit, and now he's doing really great, and that's what we did. So that's my story. This is a very unedited, rough video. I'm a bit of a troglodyte. I really don't know much about the technology, so I'm just gonna post this as is. Again, I am going to disable the comments because I'm sure that plenty of moms out there will yell at me for not trying hard enough to breastfeed my baby, but it is what it is. Every kid is different, every mom is different, every relationship is different, and I've really come to terms with what I've decided to do, and we're all happy and healthy, and that's really the most important thing. They say, fed is best. It's not that breast is best, it's that fed is best, and he's fed and he's thriving and he's doing great. So if you are really looking to reach out to me, I'm happy to answer any questions that I can possibly answer, or, you know, provide any insight or any support. Parenting is really hard. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And yeah, so feel free to comment, or, you know, try to get in touch with me on one of my other videos, and I'll try to reach out. So thanks for watching if you watch this, and I really hope that it brought you some support and some help, and just listen to your gut and do what feels right for you and your baby. All right, thank you. Bye.